Hello, everybody, and hello, Ahni Bonner. So honored and happy to have you here today. Ani is a somatic movement educator and a yoga teacher and a creative coach and many things. Ani, do you want to add something to introduce yourself?
Well, I think I am those things, and I'm also work in the civil rights arena, doing like a lot of analytical work. So what I feel like my world is bringing together the heavily analytical with the creative. So the tax, bringing oppositions together so that people can really connect to their creative side in order to do better work that they might want to do that's stepping into some of the hard
Mm.
shoveling that the world needs done. So
Oh,
it's all about coming back to the creative in order to really do the work well.
so interesting. I had an intuition that Ani is the one to talk with about intuition. So the theme of our discussion today is intuition or gut sense or hunch or sixth sense. So there are many maybe similar names to this concept that we might call intuition. And maybe Ani, to start out, so what does intuition mean to you? Is it something that is a physical sensation? Is it a mental insight? How do you relate to this word?
Mm-hmm. I think of intuition as the way we approach the unknown. It's like when I think of it, my experience with it, it's sort of like when scientists decided to point the Hubble telescope at the empty field,
Mhm.
and they let it be there for I don't know how long, a week or something. And then in that space where they thought or saw nothing, there was suddenly tens of millions of galaxies. So for me, we live in a world of patterns that we create in our brain where we live in certain ways that reinforce certain patterns. So we only see like this net that we've created. And we overlook all kinds of things that are actually there. And so intuition, our brains help us see the patterns and help us predict things and create sort of certainties around predictable events. But the intuition is when we decide to open ourselves up to the unknown, the uncertain, the seeming like nothing's there,
Mm.
nothing's happening kind of aspects of things, and let that open up. And I think it often is feeling like it feels, what am I doing? What's happening? Nothing's happening. We have all these stories around it, but when you stay in the practices of being with that space, it's really like the default mode network. It's not task oriented. It's opening up to the space of the unknown, the uncertain, the unseen. It's like if you stay with a practice around that, at some point something emerges that you're just like, oh, wow. I mean, mushrooms are a great example of this when you're out mushroom hunting, right? It's right there in front of you, but you cannot see it. And then it's like once you see one, you start to see it. So that's to me, the intuitive realms are these spaces where we're walking around like ghosts
Mm.
in a space that we don't really perceive yet. And there's so many dimensions to it that we haven't encountered yet because we are so drilled into our pattern. So it's when we step back and allow for other things to, I don't know, to listen, even though there's maybe no sound, to smell, even though we feel like maybe, I don't know if I'm smelling something or not, and then keeping with it, something enters and it's just like, and like, oh.
Mm.
So there's that way. I think I remember reading about indigenous herbalists of certain traditions who they talk about the way they walk through the woods or through the natural world and interact with plants. They don't think like with their brain. It's like
Mm.
something that they describe as interacting. It's like when you feel a presence, right? When you are in the presence of someone and there's so much that is not said, not thought, not spoken, not derived from an intellectual process, but it's like you feel something. And that's how they describe knowing. It's like they're with acknowledging the world as a place of living beings in a way, like you expect, you don't know. Like to our intellectual minds, an apple tree is an apple tree is an apple tree, right? Maybe not to an apple arborist or something like that. But what about this apple tree in front of me that I'm looking at, full of blooms? What is its personality? I know that somebody, a little kid, ate an apple and put it in the ground and it grew into this tree. And so it has this magical history of having sort of grown in different ways than apple trees. But how do I perceive that? How can I start doing that? For me, an intuitive act would be to approach the tree with, I don't know, but I know, maybe I know a few things about you. And maybe I'll start to see you differently if I just quiet my own thoughts or let them run out, whatever the process is, and get to that space where I am receptive.
Oh, this is so interesting. So I feel like intuition from this description, it's like it's feeling. It has this like wow element, and it is crucially connected to a mind that is a state of the mind that is not full of my own preconceived thoughts. And also, it's a state of being receptive also. I love this. It's
And it
being
might, I'm
the
sorry.
perception. I've been thinking a lot about this myself also, and in relation to people, acquaintances that I have who have like closed some parts of them. The heart, for example, is closed or something. And I'm thinking, wow, it is so important. This, if something in me is closed, I can't be receptive. And for me to stay in my intuitive flow, I actually have to be in an open state. And I also have to be in a mental state where I'm not ruminating and my thoughts are going in circles. So I feel like the receptive point is very important.
Yeah, and we all have experiences that create some deep patterns in our lives. Like it could be an accident, a trauma, or just a vivid experience we've had. And so we approach certain things with a very protective. I think there's something about vulnerability necessary for intuitive.
Uh-huh. Oh, how
And
interesting.
yeah, and just being open to uncertainty, and that's scary. It really is scary. We've kind of evolved to put props around us that tell us where we're at and what we can predict. And we have thrived at our predictive capabilities. But one thing we haven't done, we've been very successful in being able to sort of manipulate things and manifest things in the world as human beings, but it seems like we struggle with the joy, creativity, and like the sense of wonder that is in that open field. We kind of mash that down a bit in order for our whatever economies to function, what we think is development. I mean, so we are, I feel like really that this is one of the most important questions there is how do we re-enter the intuitive open space field of discovery and innovation and creativity? And it is a really big question. And how do we bring it into spaces that have closed it down? Like this doesn't exist here. It can't, because that's not productive. We can't like charge value for that. It's so interesting where it's one of the most valuable things. And I think people know it when they feel it, but they might call it a spiritual experience or a revelation or a sensation they have that's maybe it gets them in touch with their emotions in a way they haven't before. And I'm feeling it like it's got a pulse and a heartbeat, and it's almost terrifying. because it's part of that
Mm.
wildness that we are, that we've kind of untethered from, that we are apart from, in the world we've created.
Ah,
It's
I see. How do you know from your personal experience? How do you know that something is like an intuitive insight or your intuition is speaking versus this is just a random thought that comes to me? You see what I mean? How do I know that I have an intuitive inkling?
That's a really good question, because I feel like it always is occurring in a sort of pulsation of, you know, it's in concert with the way our mind works. We might create a situation or a process, like creatives know this. When you have a vision for creating something, where does that vision come from? Often it comes through either a journey or an inspired idea, or you're on the top of a mountain or something and you see something and you had this idea rolling around in your head, and then you're like, something opens up and it's like that, or somebody says something in conversation that you're like, somehow something gels, right? And you have an idea of what you're going to do. And then when you start manifesting it, it's like you get back down into like, oh, how does this pen work? Or like, how am I going to make this yellow look this yellow? Like, I've been working on a sort of gateway liminal space transformational painting for myself that really called for like this. How did I know it was intuition? Well,
Mm-hmm.
I might be working on something that calls for an organic symmetry, and I'm drawing a circle over here. And why does it call for that? I don't know. How do you know when you look at a color that this orange is more attractive to you than this green or pink or something? And it's that little vibration of um, sensation from the body that
Uh-huh.
emerges out, rather than like, oh, I've got to make this. I've got to, that you might then like try to recreate that orange. And then you're like looking at that orange and then you're becoming heady with the like mixing. And then
Mm.
you try it on and you're like, no, that's not quite right. Is that intuition? I mean, it's just like, that's not what my vision has, or that's not what my body is responding to. Like, and you like add a little warm tone and then it suddenly is glowing and you're like, yes.
Mm.
Or sometimes I'm finding myself, especially in painting these days, it's, it's all this sort of evolution through practice stuff too, because I'm now thinking of when I play the guitar, for instance, I'm practicing something that's difficult for me. I think we've all been in a place where we practice something for a long time. It seems like we never get it, never get it, never get it. And then one day randomly, it seems to like your body's integrated it. And it's like you're able to play this. And then when you're able to not think about it, something totally different happens. And a whole new world of possibilities emerge. And out of that bigger field comes a like creative spark, which is, to me, that's intuition. It's when that magical sort of, maybe it's a flow state,
Mm.
because I mean, when people are in flow states, they describe like all the structure falls away.
Yes.
All the practice has been relevant up to that point, but I'm not thinking about it anymore. It's as if the breeze and my body are one. It's like somehow I am so perceptive of the whole context I'm in. I'm open and present and responsive. I think intuition is more responsive than simply, what did you say, having a, how do you know it's intuition?
And not just like a thought, like just that your mind is thinking or
Yeah. I think
okay.
intuition is dynamic and alive with other things. And the more it's expansively open to the aliveness around it, or more attuned to more like mystery and wonder, and not overthinking it, but being with and alive with. It's like, I am sure it's probably like when people dance, and that entrainment that happens when people dance together. Like there's a whole level of experiences.
Oh, I love this. I love all these words that you're using. The open, present response and being alive with, and how intuition is in touch with other something around us also. I have so many questions. I don't know where to go.
Well, questions or insights. I mean,
Questions. Well, one insight that, well, when I was listening to you, I was reminded of the fact that I do feel differently when I'm thinking a thought that comes from me, because I'm somehow familiar with this thought, or I somehow can feel that my mind goes there. And then I receive thoughts that I feel they're like given to me, or somebody whispers them into my head, or some angel gives it to me. Or those I feel like are intuitive thoughts, because they are unfamiliar to me. And I'm like surprised. Oh, how did this thought just like come to my mind? And then I also feel like those more intuitive thoughts, they're gentle, but they demand for like some immediate action a little. It's like, do this,
yeah.
call this person, talk to Ani about this, buy this book, go down this way, do this. They're like directing me in a certain way. That's how but sometimes then I doubt, because sometimes I feel like, well, maybe that's just an impulse. And then I don't actually know if intuition and impulse are the same thing or not, but maybe.
And there are impulses that are, like what like don't step on cracks, like, or something. There's the impulses that are about our minds, the way they get obsessive or compulsive,
Yes.
maybe impulsive versus compulsive, like
Yeah.
that I have to do that because, or I
Yes.
get an impulse that I
Right.
have to. There's an impulse that feels like it is. That's a
Yeah.
live vibration. That's like a heartbeat of something else alive that comes
It's
through
right.
you.
I
Piece
love
of, yeah.
I
And
love
it's like,
very much. Oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead.
I love this energy of the aliveness and the vibration and all, because to me also intuition, what makes it different from a thought or an impulse, is that there is this sense of inspiration somehow behind it also. There's an aliveness behind intuition also, even if it's a subtle and small kind of thing. There's.
Yeah. It's like a yes and what people who
Yeah.
improvise talk about.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Let
it
me ask you. No, go ahead.
I'm
No.
just saying, yeah, it creates like a totally different energy and way of being in the world if you trust intuition and trust that something's going to come, and you're naturally going to be responding to it in the way that you most like. What is that? Even whatever vibe it is, it doesn't have to be beautiful and soft and pink or whatever. It can be energetic, and trust your vibes.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, but I mean, it's about, what is it about? It's about this moment now, and the very classic, not being like filling it with everything you're averse to or attracted to, but really seeing through all of that, which places on top of things are our opinions of what they should be. And it's allowing things to express themselves and yourself to be in an expressive conversation that maybe you'll discover things about yourself that you never knew were possible. Or, it's allowing something to come out of this that we are, instead of kind of out of our little tunnel funnel of what we wish we were, know we're supposed to be, or,
Yeah.
very much like it's risky, undoubtedly risky. Even when you're doing like an intuitive painting, it's very risky. People get it. We do a layer like um maybe an essence layer that is like the energy of as I'm going through this gateway, I'm expecting a transformation. There's some circumstances in my life that are going to be transformative in the next couple of months. And I'm like, can I see the seed of the energy that I would like to manifest and visualize? And then I create I go on a maybe journey where I imagine I am the seed of this thing that grows. And give myself space to sort of daydream inside of that, and then let the images come to me and attune to those images and not try to change the fact of a bunny rabbit hopping through the middle of it. Like, why is the bunny rabbit there? I don't know, but let me just accept it. Let me accept the colors. Let me put this in the essence of that, and do whatever my arms want to do with the paintbrush or with my fingers, or like to express and put on that bottom layer that's going to get all covered up, that's going to hold an essence, and it's going to be the essence of this vision. So there's something important about receiving that. And then if you step back, so oftentimes you're so close to it, it's like you're doing it, then you step back and it's like, oh, I like this, I don't like that, or oh, this is beautiful. And then when you move to the next layer, it might be about creating some kind of structure and manifestation, and you're covering up the thing that is you want to hold on to. So it is risky even in a creative space. When you're just slapping paint on a canvas, there's no physical risk, right? It's just like, but there's something hard that I find in the circles I'm in, where we're doing intuitive art. There is really a moment for people where I don't want to cover up what is. I want to keep that thing that I think is beautiful. And when they do transgress that boundary and say, this is intuitive art, this is not about like holding on to something, it's about the process, it's about what I gain from doing it. And it's often the case that people are completely surprised then about what comes through when they're brave enough to sort of jump off the cliff in a way, like, so to speak, and cover up or do something different to that. Sorry, I'm doing this to you.
No. Tell us, Ahni, tell us more about your practice. So what you're teaching, also facilitating your practice of intuitive art. So if listeners are listening to this and they're like, oh, but what does she do exactly in those circles? What does it look like? Intuitive art, what do you do? What does it mean?
Oh, it's a lot of fun. And it's like unveiling a part of you. For me, it's like this, but it's almost like, even for people who are painters by their education, or they paint all the time, they might have jobs as graphic artists, or they're artists in the world of the art. When they sit down to intuitive paint, it's like it's coming from a completely different place, and they're breaking all the rules they ever learned. So it's like maybe they're using a lot of skills too, but at the same time, intuitive painting is just that. It's like when you're choosing a paint to, usually it's driven around a purpose. We create, I might create a process where there's layers of a painting that we do, or there might be a process for if somebody's having a particular challenge, we might design a painting process around that. Like, what are the stages of this challenge? And how do we make then an experience where we're slapping paint on canvas, and usually in a big life-size way, so it's really big in front of you and your whole body is involved, and you like look at colors, just like I've already said, and you kind of like, oh, this, for some reason, this, I know the drabbest gray ever is like whatever, that it's like waving at you for some reason. It's like, okay, I have no idea. I don't agree with it. It's not an impulse in the sense that I'm not like, ooh, that one, but that color is somehow speaking. And so then you put that up and you start, like, maybe that's a process of journaling and reflecting and sitting back, looking at it, being in process with it, letting it tell you when it's finished. When it is finished, living with it, moving it around your house or your living space, um, letting it speak to you, being in relationship with it. And then maybe there's a place where you no longer in relationship with it. You understand what it's given you and you're ready to give it to somebody else or whatever. So it's definitely a group process, and usually well, I do it individually and in groups, but when it is a group process, it's amazing what happens. I was in a recent group process where I was participating, and it was like a 3-day intuitive painting group that we were doing, workshop. And out of maybe 30 people, 20 people used this very off the bell curve copper paint in their works. And so when everybody holds them up, you see patterns that are similar, you see like colors that are similar. And all of us were like, this color is not, I mean, like, we were in some ways, it wasn't repulsion, but it was like, why this color is coming up. And then to discover that it came up for so many people and people's experience with that boundary and how they transgressed the boundary, that it was like the resistance that was coming with the color, and then the color combinations that emerged out of that juxtaposing with copper. It's fascinating. What do you get out of it? You get like a lot of ideas, right? And really relevant ideas to your life. It's totally relevant.
How does it happen? How do I engage into intuitive art and then I get ideas about my life? How does this work?
Yeah, because it's letting you step away from the, like, what's known. I think it is really about stepping away from what's predictable and known and certain. And you get to get in that default brain network, or what they used to call right brain. And it's like a whole different set of constellations are going off.
Yes.
And
Ahni,
of course, like dreams. I mean, dreams what integrate our experiences. They seem bizarrely like magical things happen, things you would never think happen, but somehow they're integrating our experiences. It's necessary for us to dream, right? And we don't know.
Ahni, do you agree with me if I say that any kind of there are many freeing practices that we can use to develop our intuitive self. So for example, I believe, since I'm in the world of dance and movement mostly, I feel like free dancing, for example, intuitive without choreographic patterns kind of dancing can get us into these states of the mind where I get insights about my life. I start, being in the flow more. Or for example, automatic or free writing, for example. I just write, or I might be speaking out loud by myself, again, in this kind of free manner. I might be drawing intuitively. Do you agree with me that any kind of freeing practice where I step away from structures and rules can make us more intuitive?
Yeah, I do agree. And there are so many ways to be creative, or is that what creativity is? I mean, when we step away from structures, but we can also take deep practices with us, and in the daily trust of the practice, not trying to make it anything except a practice. I think things can emerge from that too. And I guess that's what you're talking about, is when we move the body. I
Yes.
mean, we evolve from cultures and civilizations and tribes that did these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's how they understood big patterns and rhythms and seasons, and I don't know, like it feels like the exact thing about vibes in our body, that the rhythms in our body are really important. Like there's something that happens in the dance. It's much more clear than maybe in the writing. But even in the writing,
In
what
the writing
happened?
it happens also. Go ahead.
What were you going to say?
In the writing it happens also. I feel, for example, I write, and then it feels like something is somebody's taking over my hand. Usually the hand starts to move faster, and it's like you're receiving these ideas, or you come up across this idea that you didn't know that you had, or something becomes more clear, or something shows you a new spark, a new avenue opens up.
Yeah. The characters start taking on lives of their own. Like if you're writing a novel, it's just like you start living this experience of creating a world.
Yeah.
I experienced it also in like yin yoga or many
Yes.
types of yoga, but when you're very focused on a sensation
Mhm.
that is staying with the sensation, it's amazing what then emerges. It is so like that Hubble telescope empty field. You might have some deep in the hip kind of pain that it feels really good to be stretching this way, and then maybe 3 minutes or more into a stretch, there's something on the other side of the body that you realize is gripping really hard, like and holding on. And it's
Mhm.
like you look at it, or in your mind, I look at it, and it starts to maybe, just because you're noticing it, it's like seen, and it starts to act different. It's like your own body, but it's like something I'm in dialogue with
Yes.
that is almost like something other than myself. But it's me knowing myself more through this there's a space here that I'm not this thing doing this. It's like another being.
Mhm.
It might sound strange, but I think you seem to understand.
Let's talk more about the body, because that's at the heart of everything here. Do you feel, well, what is the relationship between the body, movement, and intuition? I don't know how to put it more elegantly as a question. Maybe, for example, do certain movement practices such as yoga or dance, in your experience, do they help us become more intuitive, or how do they train this capacity in us? Is it important for a person who wants to become more intuitive to have a connection to bodily awareness, for example? What do you think?
What would it look like if somebody was not? Well, it's interesting because it makes me think of those pilots that they have to be extremely adept at all their math and science and all their
Yes.
buttons on the ceiling, all this stuff to fly these whatever spaceships. But then they're put in these like gyrometer things that get their bodies going in every kind of twisted way, where they're experiencing spins in space, and they prepare their bodies that way. And so many of them had out of body experiences. One, like, I think I heard this on a radio lab, if you have a radio lab, but it was like one person was suddenly out on a lake with his dad fishing.
Mhm.
Something totally like these experiences. And for a long time, they wouldn't talk about them, because if they did, people would think they were crazy and couldn't fly a spaceship. And then it was only through a sort of like the stories kind of coming out and being known as like this happens to people, that we could begin to expose it. And that's sort of just like seeing yourself in your own thing. How do we acknowledge our bodies? There's new studies that are all over the news now that if we get up every half hour and just move for 5 minutes. I'm moving. I do this for 5 minutes. I'm still in this meeting or whatever, but it's like your blood sugar glucose like levels completely shift like by 80% or something wildly positive. So there's that end of the spectrum of things. But you're talking about something slightly different, right? Like, or are those related?
Yes, intuition. Like,
Yeah.
now, if I do yoga, for example, let's imagine there's a student that comes to you. Ani, I've heard it's good to be more in touch with intuition. How do I get there? I see that you're teaching yoga classes. Are you going to help me become more intuitive in
Mhm.
your yoga classes?
Mhm. Yeah,
Explain.
definitely.
How do
Well,
you?
definitely. It's like you see it happen before your eyes when people get relaxed enough or something happens. I think those things are related because our body takes us to unexpected places. Our body takes us to open spaces that are undiscovered, when we get up and our blood sugar is like less of a peak and more of a flat line, we're not having glucose spikes, we're in a state where we experience life differently. Our organs are not degenerating at the same pace. We're processing oxygen, we're processing stress differently. So, I mean, in effect, we're talking about what opens up the world to your sensations and to discovery and wonder. And yoga classes, much like that free form dancing, it's like, it's almost like very deliberately entering the body at a level where you have to surrender to it in some ways. Surrender to the dance. Because you could all day be free dancing and be like, oh, I hate this. But I'm free dancing because they want me to, supposed to, and then it might be like, okay, I've been doing this for an hour, like, okay, I'm doing it, and it's like, yeah, and then you get to like a different space where there's like that surrender where you're actually giving it up to the possibility that you don't know. So I think we're in a big struggle around that. And so, yeah, I think body practices help you get there for sure.
But as you were saying earlier, this is very scary to not to know.
To expose yourself like that, like,
Yeah, to surrender, but I'd have to have a plan in my head as to what's going to happen and how. And in other words, to give up control, to give up to be in this realm of uncertainty, which we are in all the time, is also deeply
mhm.
takes
So,
guts.
yeah, and we create spaces where we feel like we're with other people who want to go there. And those are, I think, what we describe sometimes as safe spaces. Safe seems like a low bar, but it's more like spaces where people are really willing to create a lot of space for people to follow those intuitive pulses. Like, and what happens when groups of people start following their intuitive pulses with each other? Like whole new dimensions open up. So that's why in these classes, like you create, and
Mm.
like I try to create with yoga and art medicine, it's like giving people this just space to explore that. Not giving, co-creating actually.
Mm.
Um, so it's
Mhm.
really exciting. And it's like, I don't know, it's like when you're in a field of living beings, it's pretty exciting to think about, where could we go if we were, you know, really, what would the edge be? Who's like, and what would be feel revelatory and I don't know, exciting,
This
maybe
is-
scary, maybe risky, maybe actually risky for some people. I mean, people go skydiving, right? And
mm,
they feel elation and total out of the body.
mm,
Intuition, I think, is opened up in those experiences too.
mm. Well, let's imagine a different kind of listener. A different kind of listener says, "Well, Ani, who cares? Why would I care about developing my intuitive capacities? Like, how would you explain the benefits of becoming more intuitive to somebody who doesn't quite believe in the value of that yet, but is a little bit curious?"
Mhm. I wonder what they do care about. It made me really curious for one thing. So that's like I would be curious about what they do love, and I think that it can be easy to live in a world where you go to work and you park your car and you walk in and you hate 8 hours of your day. And you sit in a rigid chair and you feel really sore after the day is over, and you feel like you're getting tireder and tireder and more worn out, and there's no meaning to it. And then you come home and you're too tired to do anything else, and then the pattern starts again. So I think there's a lot of people living those kind of lives, and I think that when we start to introduce life and get risky and introduce life into our very own bloodstreams, sounds strange, but if we start these practices, whatever they might be, maybe it's a breathing practice, it's like spaces start to open up where, oh, this matters and this doesn't. Not that it's not important to eat, not that it's not important to somehow feel safe where you can sleep, and all these things that we need in our lives and can co-create with each other or can find through jobs that pay us money in this economy. But there's something about it too that is, where am I integrating my life? And am I brave enough to? And it seems critical to all the questions we're facing as humans. And so the thing is that when people start to allow something else to reveal itself through a practice, it's like, one, like the vascular system works better. And so that feeling of that basic aliveness, I mean, functionally, it can just be your body functions better. Your body wants to be alive more or is alive more, if you know, and then you take that extra oxygen with you into that default world that you're living in. And you, maybe somebody walks in the room and you see what's under their skin, or notice their tone of voice, or something that makes it more textured and alive. Like, it's when you do it here, it enters the rest of your life too. And it can reduce stress. You can feel more meaning. I mean, there's so many, like, it's just like, I mean, I think people like you and me who do these kinds of practices, they're non-negotiable in life. Like, this cannot be diminished, this needs to grow, kinds of pursuits. And I feel very lucky to have that perspective. It's absolutely essential to the whole core and root of my life. So
Great. And what would you recommend to a listener who wants to start this journey of becoming more in touch with their intuition? Listening to you, I feel like maybe one of the things you would say is find a practice where you can explore this side of yourself.
yeah, and it could be anything. I think it's really interesting to say, for the next 6 to 8 weeks, I'm going to choose something like something that seems like to me, a sensation, like touching or tasting or smelling is like a good one. Like when I do smelling practices, I feel like, well, when I exhale, I can't smell at all, right? So it's only on the inhale. And then I think, I don't smell anything. Or maybe if I go outside, then I smell mint and I like, oh, mint, or then move on to other flowers and things. And I think in those spaces where, like right now, I don't think I can smell anything. I feel, air going in, but I think if a dog were here, it'd be all over, like, like whatever, they smell 60,000 times better than us. And then like when people who are pregnant often can smell better. So there's this idea of being the Hubble telescope and taking that empty field. I'm just going to practice my smelling. I'm going to attune to smelling. Like when I eat, when I drink my tea, I'm going to smell it, take it in. And just those practices create new neural pathways for smelling better and more, like opening the world up, like to your smelling sensation. I mean, that's a simple thing, but it can be anything, like you said. And I think that we're always more joyful in the practice and more able to repeat it and be attuned to it and sort of go through all its challenges and celebrations if we're in a community.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also critical for some reason. Why?
Interesting. Thank you so much, Ahni. Is there something that you want to say about this topic of intuition, sixth sense, gut feeling that I haven't asked you and it's on your mind? Your intuition is speaking right now to tell this to us, to the listener.
It is. And I wish I knew the artist's name. I'll have to get it to you. But this it was in Yes Magazine a couple of years ago. And I think it was the firm Deloitte, like hired this performance artist to come into their workspaces and to basically stare out the window and or ride the elevator 4 times, just be in the space and not be working. But none of the workers knew. And people had really angsty reactions to it, like, she's not working. What is she doing? And I remember working in spaces where there's very philosophical people, like looking out the window, thinking through their thoughts. And it's so interesting that we live in, or we have workspaces that people want to bear down on that as if it doesn't have a value. And what some workspaces are discovering is that when you allow for that space, when you allow for time, some workspaces are like, give people time to go do body work during the day for 3 days a week, 3 hours or whatever. It's weird to put a container like that around it, but I think more and more the revolution is that we actually are bodies, and our bodies don't. That is a ridiculous, we got to see it in a way that sees it for what it is. And these other things that seem frivolous, like dancing, free dancing, style dancing, it's like really recognizing and seeing and investing our time, investing our beings in like those kinds of things. And just, I mean, even as an experiment, but I think that is revolutionary.
Mm-hmm. Ahni, thank you so much. Tell us, the listeners, where can they find you if they want to take your classes and get in touch with you?
Synergeticscoaching@gmail.com. Or I do have a Somatic Expeditions website. So you can look up Somatic Expeditions and see an event I hosted and get in contact with me. And I do, I coach creative people, and creatives can be anybody, you know, but it's creative coaching. So it's very multimedia. I don't know if you, it's like, you know, interactive dialogue where things emerge through 2 people co-creating a space around a question that one person has. So it's super fun and energizing and inspiring. It's amazing when 2 people, I think the real way of the world is not that we download on other 2 other people, but that in the co-creation we discover things we never thought possible before. And it's the co-created world, I think, that is, and that's what we're talking about, doing kinds of practices that enter that space. And it's odd, yeah, it's odd that we live in a world that's still about I as an individual do this with people, and they can contact me through this, individual, because it really is, it's about entering a space together that's co-creative. And like, hey, let's play, let's go to places that are kind of scary, let's transgress maybe boundaries that we haven't before, and let's discover together. And we all emerge like benefited. It's like the values held in a collective, just like this conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. So beautiful insights, very inspiring. Let us be in touch with our intuition through arts and creativity, and being alive to what's around us. And so we'll see each other, dear listeners and people watching us next time. This is Hiie from Paris and Ahni Bonner. Bye-bye, everybody.